A sepia-toned street stretches into the distance, its cobblestones worn smooth by time, its buildings standing silent and intact. And yet, there is no one there. No movement, no figures, no trace of life. Just an empty city, captured in perfect detail by a camera that by all accounts should have recorded everything in front of it. At first glance, these photographs from the 1800s appear ordinary, early examples of a new and revolutionary technology preserving moments that would otherwise be lost. But the longer you look, the stranger they become. Entire streets are empty. Busy urban centers appear abandoned. Even in places known, historically, to have been crowded and active, the images show nothing. The official explanation is simple, and it is repeated often. Early photographic technology required extremely long exposure times, sometimes lasting several minutes. Any person or object that moved during that time would not register clearly on the final image, effectively disappearing from view. Only what remained still, buildings, roads, statues, would be captured in full detail. It is a reasonable explanation, and in many cases it is likely correct. But it does not explain everything, because in some of these photographs, certain details remain strangely consistent. Stationary objects are sharp, as expected, but so too are elements that should have moved. Trees, for instance, their leaves frozen without blur, despite wind that must have existed. In other cases, a single individual appears faintly, as though partially erased, while the rest of the scene remains untouched. And occasionally, one person stands perfectly still long enough to be captured, raising an unsettling question. If one person could remain visible, why not others? As the number of these images increases, a pattern begins to emerge, not of absence, but of selective presence. Consider the wide boulevards of early European cities, photographed at times when markets should have been active and streets filled with activity. Historical records describe these areas as vibrant, noisy, and crowded, yet the images show vast emptiness, as if the population itself had momentarily vanished, not blurred, not partially visible, simply gone. In some photographs, horse-drawn carriages appear faintly, almost ghost-like, suggesting motion during exposure, but the horses themselves are sometimes missing or incomplete, their forms dissolved into the background. It creates a subtle contradiction. Movement is sometimes captured, but not consistently, and not always in ways that align with the expected physics of long-exposure photography. Even more curious are the rare images where groups of people do appear, posed, still, and clearly visible. In these cases, the exposure time does not seem to erase them at all. Their faces, clothing, and posture are preserved in sharp detail, implying that the technology was capable of capturing human presence when conditions were controlled. Which raises a quieter, more complex question. If people could be captured when they stood still, how often were they actually absent rather than simply erased? Of course, there are practical considerations. Photographers of the time often chose moments of stillness intentionally, setting up their equipment early in the morning or during less crowded hours to avoid complications. Cities were not empty, but the timing of the photograph may have created that illusion. And yet, some images resist that explanation. There are photographs taken in broad daylight, with shadows indicating midday sun in locations known to be central and active. The idea that these places were entirely empty at such times becomes increasingly difficult to reconcile. It does not disprove the official explanation, but it does leave space around it, areas where certainty fades into possibility. As more archives are examined and more photographs brought into public view, the consistency of this visual absence becomes harder to ignore, not as evidence of something specific, but as a recurring anomaly, one that sits quietly within accepted history, rarely questioned. Perhaps it is nothing more than a limitation of early technology, combined with selective timing and the practical challenges of capturing life in motion. Or perhaps it's a reminder that what we see in historical records is not always a complete reflection of reality, but a filtered version shaped by tools, conditions, and choices we no longer fully understand.
Because a photograph feels like proof. It feels definitive. It shows us what was there. But sometimes, more importantly, it shows us what isn't. And when entire populations seem to vanish from the visual record, when cities appear empty despite every indication that they were not, it invites a quieter kind of curiosity, not about what is visible, but about what might have been left out. And if something as simple as a photograph can erase the presence of thousands without us noticing, what else in the record of the past might still be missing?